Alright, I'm working on a 2003 Bombardier Traxter model ATV. It's got a 500cc single cylinder 4-stroke motor in it. And the complaint on this was an electrical problem. Alright, so the reason why this thing is ripped apart is I already know what's wrong with it, but I felt it pretty important to show what I did to get to where I'm at. Number one, this is an expensive repair, so I felt the need to make a call based on confidence and rather than a guess. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of walk through what I did to get to this point. First thing I did was I got to the machine, and of course the battery was dead. Customer stated this thing's been sitting for at least 10 years. So I had no idea what to expect. So I hooked the jumper up to it. I hit the key, and the moment I turned the key on, I had no power. So the next thing I did was I went to a fuse down, the fuse panel on this bike. It's over here, and there's a 20 amp fuse down here that feeds the MPEM, or they call it multi-purpose electronic module, and that was popped. So I changed the fuse, and the moment I changed it, turned the key on, it popped again. So I'm just going to show you. I put a 15 amp fuse in here because I don't want to use up all my 20 amp fuses, just to show you that when you hit the key, it immediately pops. And 15 amps, after what I've seen, a known good MPEM only draws about 7-8 amps when it's on. So in my opinion, I think a 15 amp fuse should have been more than enough to support this thing. Alright, so the next thing I did is I wanted to figure out which wire was feeding the computer from here. So I took my test light and I took the alligator end of it and I hooked it into a T-pin, and the other end of the test light is going to battery positive. So whenever I find a ground, my test light will light. So the next thing after that was I went to the panel and I flipped it around, and I just turned my key on and off until I found the one that feeds the MPEM, and it is this. It is a red with a green trace, I believe. Yeah, it's a red with a green trace. And I pierced the wire and I checked it with the key on and the key off, and the light illuminated with the key on and it went out with the key off. And I'm just going to make a note here that after I get done doing my checks right where I'm at, I'm going to seal up all these holes, and they're not even holes, they're just little puncture marks with a little bit of this stuff. Where is it? It's around here somewhere, but it's gasket maker. Just a little bit of black gasket maker. I'm just going to take it and just splooge it across here so corrosion doesn't get in there. So I found it as a red with a green trace, and then I found my way along the frame, along the harness, and I went up here. And there it is, the red with a green trace. So then I wanted to get a little high tech, and I wanted to take one of these fuses, one of these inexpensive Chinese fuses. It says it's a 20 amp fuse, but it's not popping with 20 amps, more than 20 amps going through it. So I guess that's only hearsay with these fuses. So I'm going to pull that. Pulled the wrong one out. The 15. I'm going to pull the 15 amp fuse out for the MPEM. The one that's blown. And I'm going to install. It says it's 20 amps, but I'm going to throw it in there. Anyway, let me get another fuse to just replace the one I dropped. Alright. It's a little tough to do this with like more than one hand. I'm going to turn the key on now. Key is on. Got no lights on the dash. However, I did notice I got a tail light, so that's something. But anyhow, so I busted out a little friend of mine And I'm on a low amp probe on a 40 volt screen, and on my probe 40 amps, and I went over to this wire and I just hooked my amp clamp around it, and just going to turn it on, and that's more than enough. I'm just going to stop it. Whoops. Let's record again. Stop it. Okay, let's record again. And that initial turn on is what's popping my fuses. As soon as I turn it on. So let's go back. I'm going to show you my min-max. Max, I don't know if you can see it, it's 44 amps. Currently, right now, where cursor 1 is 0 amps. But I'm going to move it to this peak right here. And that's about 31 amps. But if we go back, right here, that's where I turn the key on. And just kind of get on there. That's 40 amps. 39 amps of current flow. So I got 39 amps of current flow coming through this wire here when I turn this key on, and I got no dash action. So the next thing I wanted to know what it is that's causing this. And this isn't a constant high amperage. This is actually an evenly spaced pulsing. We're about 9 milliseconds apart. Let's go to the next one. Whoops. Let's go back, take a look here. And we're about 9 milliseconds apart again on that second one. So it's an evenly spaced pulse. And we're going up to about 20, this one's at 31 amps, the second pulse at 27 amps, you know, and there's a 25 amp fuse that comes out of this. That's telling me why. This is really not a wiring issue. This has to be a computer problem because of this pulsing. So the next thing I did was I went ahead and I unplugged everything. I unplugged all the sensors. I unplugged everything. I inspected the harness. I checked wiring. I checked the ignition switch. I checked all that stuff. And everything checked out real good. And really the only other thing that was left would be the MPEM. So, like I said, I did checks on the ground wires too. I went to there's two blacks right here, right under the red with the green, and I got the same pulsing on those two ground wires. Now, if let's say you don't have a Varus, and the first time I did this, I didn't have this, and it was actually I didn't have this with me at the time, and I decided to make this call. What I did was I got a very generic multimeter, and I set it up to an ammeter, or as an ammeter. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of focus this right here. And well, before I do that, I'll just show you. I took a blown fuse. Well, I took the blown 15 amp fuse and I stuck it where the blown MPEM fuse was, and then I took, oh, let me get this in here. This is really tough to do with one hand. Let me just put you down for a second. Alright. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to take one lead, just like an ammeter, and I'm going to run it in series with this. It's a pain in the neck. And I'm going to touch one to one side of the fuse, one lead to one side of the fuse, and I'm going to take the red lead and touch it to the other side on the broken fuse. And then I'm also going to turn the key on, and I'm just going to get on, just take a look at, you know, what kind of amperage is going through this thing while I'm touching it. And hopefully it comes up. For a brief second there, this little meter goes out of limits, and I'm on a 20 amp. See how that, for that moment right there, it jumps out of limits? A tail light coming on is not going to cause that. Alright, and also too, man, when I'm touching these leads together, I'm getting a bit of a, let me see if I can do this up. Shut myself off, man. I mean, look at that. I already melted the fuse a little bit. Alright, but I want to see if I can get that. Hang on. Now we're getting... Alright, this is probably not worth it, but you're going to have to take my word on it. This thing's sparking when you touch them together, and that's it. So I made a phone call or two to a couple of friends that do this way more often than me, and that's pretty uncut and dry. There is a short internal to this MPEM, and based on the tests I did, you know, unplugging everything, checking the harnesses, checking my connectors, checking the connections, inspecting this. You know, really, the way the circuit's met, or the circuit's designed on this, power goes to this thing first, then it gets a signal from the switch to turn on, and then it supplies power to the engine and whatnot. And so then I felt pretty confident about making my call. I actually already have a new computer. Got it right here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put it in. And we'll take the same measurements, and you know, we'll see what a known good looks like.